Hello, everyone. This is Jason here with Levelhead Trading. Going to go over what I'm looking at in Boeing. I've been interested in Boeing for a little while. Every time I hear bad news coming out about a large company that generally, does very well and has lots and lots of back orders, and there's really only one other competitor, which is Airbus. um, I get interested. So I've been making videos on Tesla, and I had mentioned that the good news was that pretty much all the bad news was already out there. You had earnings, and then you just had, a strong downtrend right up to the earnings, and then the earnings with one last push down. So Boeing, it's not about the earnings as so much as the news about the different, years ago. Well, I don't know how long ago it was, but when a couple of the planes crashed, and then more recently, this plug, they call it, that blew out. So, anyway, going into my analysis on Boeing, what I'm really interested in is the the chart setup going back to previous price levels. So on the daily chart, there's a gap. I'll make this a little bigger here. So on the daily chart, notice there's a gap right here, and this is the price that we're currently struggling with. We get a pop up, but notice the 200-day moving average is acting as resistance. The other thing acting as resistance is my 12-period exponential moving line. So you get a pop up, you touch the 200, you hit the 12 period. Again, here you go up right here, touch the 200. It's also right at that 12 period exponential line. And you do it one more time here, and then you get pushed right back down here. So the question is, are these lows here going to hold, or are we going to take one more step, or many, or it could be many steps lower? Who knows? But what I'm interested in is this price area over here, because if you notice, this was just extreme. That was probably during the time, I'm going to assume that had to be during the time that there was those Boeing crashes. So back here in September of 2023, you got down to a 19 daily RSI level. And so notice then you went from that, and you really didn't have any uh, solid bases of support along the way. You had this one here, you had this one where you created the higher low, and then really all the way up to this point, that was the only pullback that you had, and you just went straight up. So again, talking strictly about RSI levels, you get down here into below 20, into the teens, and then what did you do? The daily RSI on the daily chart eventually got up to 92, 92. So that's a pretty extreme move. So you gave it all back, just looking for an excuse for it to pull back. Then that's when you had those that most recent incident. So anyway, I'm looking for Boeing to go down a little bit more and come back into this zone, which was the change of the daily trend back here. Notice you create the low, lower high, and then you finally hit the lower low, and that marked the bottom. And then you did the trend change by coming up here, testing this high, having a little pullback, and then you broke above it, starting the trend change to the upside. So this area right here really is an inverse head and shoulders, very similar to what Tesla just did recently, where it changed the trend. So to me, I'm hoping I bought some, because even at these prices, to me, the risk is pretty low that you will have a big loss on this. But what I'm hoping for is that we come back down here and we test this area, which was the last time that you really changed the trend. And then you just went straight up. Now you basically are just doing the same thing in reverse. You're just going straight down. This area will be an area of resistance. If we break below this, then this will then be the structure that you need to battle to get back over. So I'm anticipating that we might come back into this range somewhere between 190 and 196. And another thing is going on the weekly chart now. Let's see how that looks. So on the weekly chart, you notice how we have multiple weekly inside bars. And actually on the second week here, counting this one as the first week, this was breaking slightly above that week, the previous week here, but you also broke slightly below that week. So technically it's not an inside bar because it broke above and below. So that was a little confusing for anybody that was trying to trade during that period. But then, since then, you've had a weekly inside bar to this one. So I would call this one the main one. This is the main weekly price action that will dictate the future, because the high here is 217 and the low is 198. So during the next 3 weeks, which have already concluded, you have not gone above 217 and you haven't gone below 198. The low on that week was 199.14 and the high on that week was 214. The next week was another lower weekly high to this week and lower than that week. This week, the high was 213.77, which was about $1 lower than the high of that week. And the low was higher than this week, reached down to 202. And then the week that just finished, another lower high, which was 209.80. So to me, what this looks like is it wants to take another leg down because you're creating lower highs still. So more importantly than the lows, you're creating lower weekly highs for 3 consecutive weeks. So what I'm thinking will possibly happen is, number one, we're going to get down and touch this 200-week moving average, which would be 196, which would line up with that gap fill on the daily chart where it falls on the high side around 196 and on the low side, that's this particular candle right here of 189.57. That was that time on the daily chart where I was talking about the daily trend change. And then this week was where you changed the daily trend. And notice this whole time, you never had a weekly high or low. You just made a weekly higher high and you never had any consolidation. So when you go from almost oversold, you had 34 on the weekly RSI, to going to overbought where you reached 70, you reached in the 70s here at 73.53 without any base of support being, what's the right word? Without establishing a nice base of support as you went up. That's typically what happens, is you end up giving it all back because there was no base of support established. There was no weekly high or low established during this period, which was about 2 months of just straight up action. So now we have this tightening range. And in my opinion, we're probably going to go below this 200-week moving average, at least test it. And at that point, I think we will then finally find the bottom on Boeing. So again, going back to the daily chart, this is what I'm anticipating, that we come back and we backfill. We fill up this gap because here you got into that area, you got into this zone. It's very tricky right here, but instead of making a large purchase in this area, I'm going to let it play out longer. And so, worst case scenario, in my opinion, for me, would be that this is the bottom and then it takes off and I only own a small position. But I'm being more conservative because it's clearly making weekly lower highs. And it looks to me that it wants to make one more flush down. And basically, this block here, it would, if it does do that, it should move, somewhere down here below 200 and getting into the 190s. So anyway, that's my video on Boeing. And one last, no, I think that pretty much sums it up. It's really this 200-day moving average that's resistance, 12-period moving average acting as resistance, and we need to back test this area, which was the last time that you changed the trend. This was a cup and handle, really. This was a cup and handle because you only gave back. Notice I talk about retracements from here to here. You only gave back, I'm going to assume, no more than about 38%, right? I could put the Fibonacci retracement on here and let's see what it comes out to. Exactly. So you see, I'm not talking about the current time frame. I'm going back to this period here. So there's the low, there's the high, and here's where you set the daily high or low, and it hit exactly on a 382 retracement, which is basically a bull flag, which also would correlate with the cup and the handle and then the breakout. So to me, these have not built a base of support. This has not built a base of support. So I think we're coming back into this area. We're going to retest somewhere in this time, somewhere in this price range to finally get that weekly bottom and then hopefully take off from there. And that's, if it does come down to here, that's when I'm going to buy quite a bit of Boeing. And then just focus on the daily charts from that point on and see what happens and move my stops if it does start to go up and look for a daily trend change. Right now we're in a downtrend on pretty much every time frame. So first step would be changing the daily trend, but we need to find that bottom first. So that's my video on Boeing. If you like it and you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Need some more subscribers, and we'll talk to you soon.